All right. How is it going, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me tonight. So this was kind of something that we've been trying to put together, pushed off a couple of dates, and lo and behold, we finally were able to get it to happen. So I'm super pumped for tonight. This is a guy's brain that I've wanted to pick for a little while. And I mean, you guys, through other things you've seen, other live streams and stuff he's done, his podcast, all of that, you're going to see the passion that comes from, Alan, the Spirits of French Lick. You're going to truly understand what it's all about, and just letting him explain different things. I think a lot of us who truly are passionate about, whiskey and spirits and all that, you're going to get a good idea of what is behind, well, not only Alan, but the brand and all of that. So rather than me kind of continue to ramble on here, let me bring on the man of the hour, and we'll get going with this thing here. Let me grab this real quick. All right, there he is, the man of the hour, the rock star of the bourbon world, I like to refer to him as. So thank you. We were talking a little bit before we went live, and thanks again for taking a little bit of your time. For me, this has been something I've wanted to do. Actually, hang on. Sorry, I got the wrong one. There we go.
There we go.
Right, there we go. Sorry about that.
Now my big ugly head's not.
Technical difficulties. So I was saying, for you, what resonates for me is your passion, your honesty, all of that. And that's what, for me, I was always excited to talk to you and just learn more about you, how you got going with all of these things, and what drives you, so to speak. But before we get into that, I like to always ask everybody, kind of as we get going, as a distiller, what was your day like? And I already know a little bit about this, but I think people will be interested to hear this. So what was your day like today?
It was entertaining. It was entertaining. Before I tell you this, let me also say, man, I appreciate you having me on here. And you were one of the first people to give us a legit shot and give us a positive review that let me know that we were on the right track, even with the younger stuff. And I appreciate that a lot. Yep. So, but yeah, so my day, we had a barrel pick today with some of our Mississippi friends who've been up before. And as I was telling you before we went on the air, I have learned in my 37 years of life that there are two groups of people that you should not ever responsibly try to drink with. Morticians, right? Don't ever drink with an undertaker. My buddy Adam Kelly can confirm this. He weighs about half what I do, and I don't know where he puts it, but he can put it away, and I just end up, making a mess of his porch eventually. The other group is people from Mississippi. So I have never tagged out of a barrel tasting in my life, regardless of the number of samples. But let me tell you, these guys from Mississippi, they run the gamut, man. 23 barrels sometimes, 24 barrels, and they know what they like. Don't get me wrong, but they want to go through all of the mainline products. So 5 products, right? So we're doing 4 or 5 barrels of each product, and I don't think I've ever been so thankful for lunch in my life.
I bet
I was the last couple times they were up. So, but man, they got some good barrels they picked out. I'm super excited today. This is a big day for me. We sold our very first 2 single barrels of apple brandy, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, given my background as a brandy distiller and a home distiller, being in a brandy region. So those are going to Mississippi. One of them at full proof, which is probably 135 plus, which is insane, but amazing at the same time. So it doesn't drink like 135. I'll tell you that. It's a nice one. It's a really nice one. Almost 5 years old now. So
well, and that's nice. I mean, like we were talking before we went live, you start to get those high proof, brandies that you get here, cask strength. I mean, out of the barrel into the bottle. I mean, you're getting essentially a cognac. We just can't call it that.
Right.
So, and brandy, and this is one thing that I think a lot of people don't truly understand is when you get a brandy that's cask strength, they are so flavorful. It's unbelievable. It's just a delicious spirit.
Especially that pot stilled stuff like that, all that retention and concentration you're getting. And these 2 were gorgeous. One of them was in a 62 or 64, I can't remember, once used red wine barrel that we had recharred. So it still had a little of that red wine influence in it, but it was just apple crisp is what it was.
Yeah.
The other one was a New American Oak, and it was like bright green apple. And so they were night and day from one another, and sister barrels, but different, and beautiful. So.
Yeah. And that's the best. That's the best part. I mean, I don't know how in the world those guys went through 22 or 23 barrels. Like, I don't know how the fatigue doesn't set in. I mean, aside from being drunk, I don't know how you even taste that many barrels. But anyway,
well, to their benefit, I think that they did spit most of it. So
okay, all right, that helps.
Yeah,
that helps.
But it's a marathon. It is a marathon. I'm not gonna lie.
So. Yeah, you gotta be in for the long haul on those things. That's definitely for sure. So
I'm thankful that my dad works with me, and he rode with me today, and I made him drive home. I'm like, no, because otherwise I'd probably be asleep in the office right now. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, I guess I have to say thanks for not passing out on me. So I appreciate that. So I appreciate it.
It's a miraculous thing. Came home, got some coffee, and I'm fine. Other than being tired, I think I'm good. So
good. Well, I'll try to not keep you too long so you can get to bed early tonight. So
right.
So what I wanted to ask you was, I guess just going back a little bit. So we all kind of understand a little bit about where you are now, but where and how did it kind of all begin for you in terms of your spirit, kind of introduction to things?
Yeah. So I grew up in a family of, the proper word now is, home distiller, which is really just, PC term for moonshiner. I mean, that's really what it is. But we were, distillers and also, tobacco farmers. So I was always around it. I don't really remember a time that I wasn't around it. I mean, some of my earliest memories are literally, being around a pot still, and it's just another piece of farm equipment. There was nothing enthralling, exciting, and or fun about it. It was more like, oh yeah, there's that other thing that we have to do this weekend, and that's why we can't go to the zoo, or whatever the excuse was.
Yeah.
But we were using it to pay property taxes, and pay for Christmas legitimately. And I don't have any shame in that. Nobody should ever have any shame in that. There should have never been any shame to that whatsoever with anybody that was doing it on legit, basis, as far as not poisoning people, etc., and knew what they were doing. But when I was maybe about 15, I got kind of tangentially interested in distilling for obvious reasons, not condoning that. Mm-hmm. And either had the best parents in the world or the worst parents in the world, but their whole thing was they knew that I'd figure out, things in life eventually. I was an adventurous kid. So anytime I was going to do anything that might have been a little blue, it was do it at the house so we know what you're doing. So my dad, my grandpa helped me build a little 15-gallon pot still, or 10-gallon pot still, sorry, out of it was an old coffee dispenser from Fort Knox.
Interesting.
And then they refused to tell me how to do anything. So the rules were literally do not blow yourself up and bring us something when it's worthwhile to drink. So I knew all the things that they did because I'd helped them with it. Mostly, sugar shines at that time. So not cooked mashes or anything like that. And a lot of apple brandy, because back then, and still to this day, to some extent, all over Southern Indiana, people have apple trees in their yard. Nobody does anything with them. They just let them sit there. They fall off. The hornets get around them. And then they don't want to mow them. So they're like, if you want to come get all these apples, feel free, because we're not going to do anything with them. And I don't want to deal with the hornets. So, I got a lot of free apples and a lot of free bee stings out of that deal. So then when I was about 25, I had converted our old tobacco farm. We quit raising tobacco when I was 16, I think. Converted it over to not organic certified, but what we called ecologically grown, trying to grow different types of produce as organically as possible in the Ohio Valley. And it was really just an excuse to play with very odd open pollinated crops. And I was very interested in plant breeding in a traditional way. So the problem with the Ohio Valley when it comes to agriculture, and this is just rambling here, but it gets to a point, is that there are no real inherent heirloom crops left in the Ohio Valley. The crops that would have been here that would have been part of that would have been, Native American in origin, and they're gone. So trying to develop new crops to grow in an organic system in the Ohio Valley in a little town where everyone's a gardener and nobody cares, and you have weird colored produce that nobody wants to buy, even though it tastes great. Nowadays, it wouldn't be that hard to sell that stuff. But back then they never seen a purple tomato before,
Yeah.
So you start to realize that those two things, distilling and farming, go hand in hand. Distilling is inherently agricultural, right? It's how do you make use of what you have on hand? What can you do with it? And so my brain immediately goes to, hey, I've been breeding these corns, these odd corns, field corns for, human consumption, for cornbread, grits, that sort of stuff. What happens if I throw that in a still? Does it taste different? And it did. And then it just rabbit hole, right? So
yeah,
by the time I was 28, 29, of course the show Moonshiners came along, and that blew up into a thing, because before that nobody cared, about moonshine, just a few local people, whatever. But we would go to parties, me and my now wife, and jars would come back around to me from people who I didn't know, and they shouldn't have known me, and they were asking me to sign jars. And at some point my then fiance said, wow, you better go get a job doing this or I'm out. So that, I didn't have much of a resume to turn it, probably the saddest resume anybody's ever seen at that time. And thankfully got my foot in the door down at Copper and Kings. Grateful that I got in there. I don't think they necessarily hired me because I was the best choice. I imagine I was probably the cheapest choice they had. But it worked out, and worked there for a couple of years. But I wanted to get back on the north side of the river, the magic river where nothing from southern Indiana could possibly be good, right?
Yeah.
But I knew the heritage here. I knew the background. I knew the distilling history. I knew a lot of the methodology. I'd done a lot of research on it, and I felt like I needed to get on this side of the river in order to help bring that heritage back to the forefront. And I just happened to luck out. I'd made a lot of good friends. Lisa Wicker was one of them. And I believe there were a couple others that recommended me. The Doty family was starting up the distillery. Of course, the Dotys have owned the winery, I believe, since '95. Their French Lick Winery. And so they were starting up a distillery. And so John Doty at the time had gotten my name from Lisa Wicker. And I knew I was on my way out of Copper and Kings one way or the other. Nothing against those guys, but I knew I had to get somewhere else.
Yeah. And
so they called me up and had me come in for an interview, and I looked at the facility, looked at the plans, and thought, well, this has got some gas behind it. This could be something major, because it's the largest pot still distillery in the state of Indiana. It's not the largest craft distillery, but the largest pot still, and I suspect that it will remain the largest pot still distillery in the state of Indiana, because pretty much everybody else that's going in, they're so bourbon centric, rye centric, they're dropping in columns if they're going with any size. So I'm a pot still guy, always have been, always will be.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, to go through all of that and just see, like, from the time you were young until now, that's an awful lot of just, experience, no matter, how you want to, I guess, how it shakes out. You started young, and there's where the process began, the passion, and you can tell, because, just in your tone and as you talk about it, you can sense the passion that's behind that, and you wanting to produce a product that is not only, good to you, but that other people, more importantly, enjoy it as much, if not more than you.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in love with distillation, and I have been for a long time. And there's so much, it's a humbling art in a lot of ways. It doesn't matter how good you get at it. Like, there's always some other level that you can get to. And there's always, you can come in on Monday and be like, I love my job. I know what I'm doing. I got this under control. I've done this a million times. And then, like, something happens. Something just throws you for a loop, right? Something goes wrong. Who knows? It could be anything. There's a million things go wrong in a distillery. And then you got to figure out how do I make this work? Can I make this work? And by the time you leave on Monday evening, you either got it figured out, or you're getting in the car going, I don't know why I got in this business. I'm not sure why anybody hired me. I don't think I'm clearly not qualified for this.
Yeah.
But no, I love this. Is what I do, between Spirits of French Lick, and then, doing, historic, reenactments at Locust Grove, and, working with now to some extent, hopefully in the near future, again, COVID shut this down for a while, but Spring Mill, hopefully doing some historic stuff there, and at Beck's Mill. This is what I do. I love doing it. It doesn't matter if it's production or teaching or talking about it. If I'm not distilling, I'm probably thinking about it or dreaming about it somewhere. So.
Yeah. Well, and you saying that, I think that only leads to, bigger, better, different, which is you always kind of pushing the envelope. I mean, you know, people throw around the term kind of like mad scientist and all of that. I mean, I think it's an honor for someone to say that to somebody, because they understand that the wheels are always turning, and your passion and always wanting to push the envelope to another product, testing things out, trying something that's different. Because I mean, hey, not everybody, as you know, can distill through pot still distillation, knowing how to do it. You know, so for you guys to essentially only pot still distill, I mean, that's a craft, you know, of itself right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, well, and people have this crazy misconception when it comes to pot stills too. And of course, this is because I still communicate with a lot of those quote unquote home distillers, right? But
yeah,
everybody has this conception of a pot still as just this one real basic thing. But it's not. There's so many things you can do to a pot still, so many little bells and whistles, different vapor paths, different kinds of reflux, and it's still pot still distillation. It's been going on forever. I mean, you know, if you think about this is what I tell people all the time about bourbon in particular with the pot still stuff, because I say, why double pot still distillation?
mm-hmm.
And it's all about that retention, concentration of flavor. But I tell them, listen, pot still is the oldest method of distillation in the world, short of an aquatar, which is a very primitive pot still. You know, single malt scotch still has to be made on a pot still legally. There's a rationale behind that. Cognac has to be made on a pot still legally. Bourbon doesn't, but bourbon was born on a pot still. It wasn't born on a low rectification column still. And there is a reason and a rationale behind that. It provides a different spectrum, right? I mean, if you think of bourbon as what we know it as now, and, you know, we obviously do a lot more than just bourbon, but this is just a good example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the spectrum of bourbon that we see now is basically this small little spectrum that exists because of 6 or 7 big companies that survived both consolidation with industrialization in the 1870s and then prohibition. But if you go back to the 1850s, bourbon it's huge. There's all different types of things. It's all centered around pot stills and variations on pot stills and yeast and that whole thing. So
yeah, that's it. I guess that's interesting that maybe there aren't more people. And I guess my question to you would be, is the reason that there are less people distilling with a pot still because it's more difficult? Or I mean, you've already kind of said that it sounds like they're very versatile in terms of what you can do with them. So it's not like they're singular. Is there something with a pot still that, like, can you not distill nearly as much as you can with like a column still?
Yeah, a column still basically, of course, is a continuous system versus a pot being a batch system. So it's all about, you know, how much gas is in the tank and the efficiency of it. And then two, there is a little bit of, you know, the flavor spectrum that modern drinkers have been familiar with since prohibition. You know, that flavor spectrum is very column still centric, and there's nothing wrong with it. Obviously, I love all the Kentucky stuff. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there's more colors that we can play with. And thankfully, the craft distilling movement is seeing that too. And I'm loving some of the stuff that I see come out from different people, you know, Iron Root Republic and Leopold Brothers. And, you know, I think there's some really cool stuff happening right now that 10 years ago couldn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate like a lot of just different things. Like when I first started, you know, my channel, it was really only going to be a kind of a video diary for me. And then as I started trying different whiskeys and from different areas, my love for trying different things, because, you know, we all hear good, bad, and like it's such a relative term and very subjective as to what's good and what's bad. But what I liked about it and what I liked about your stuff was right away is that it was different. This wasn't a Kentucky bourbon or whatever it may be. It was something different, and it didn't have to be good or bad. It was different, and I liked the fact that it was different. And then once I started realizing that this was all done through, you know, pot still distillation, I started to try to like figure out or correlate the difference in flavor from that versus like a column still. And what I started to kind of realize was that with a lot of the pot still distillation, it was more like grain forward. So you picked up a lot more of the grains, had a really nice mouth texture, was creamy, but it wasn't, and a lot of times people will talk about young whiskeys being very like grainy and young and youthful, but this was different. This was getting to taste like if you had shitty oatmeal versus really good oatmeal.
Yep.
They're both like the same grain, but if one is done different or you treat it a little bit different, one is really good, maybe the other one isn't as good. So that's what I really enjoyed about your stuff, was the fact that it was very like quality grain forward, which I liked, and just the flavor and the mouthfeel all kind of resonated with me. So that's why, I really got into you guys fairly early on for the most part. And it's been really enjoyable just being able to try your different releases, because I've got stuff from the old bottles, that you guys have versus the new stuff. What you're doing now, I think you guys are doing an incredible job. So
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And those labels, those new labels too, that set us off big time. And Jolie Kasperzak did a great job on those. But yeah, I'm always surprised when in particular, like we get any kind of positive, like press or we win an award or something, because we couldn't be more different. From the pot still thing to we're using brandy yeast, no chill filtration, low barrel proof, number 2 char as opposed to 3 or 4.
Yep.
It's night and day, and that's the idea. That's the whole motto: respect the grain. That's something that myself and John Doty originally talked about a whole lot, was this idea of, all right, if we're going to use pot stills and we're going to do this bourbon thing, and I proposed this to him at the time, we're looking at that spectrum. Let's widen that spectrum. So this pot still, this beautiful pot still that's all about, again, retention, concentration of flavors, breaking down long chain fatty acids and the short chain esters and phenols, which you taste in the finished product. It's all about maintaining those flavors. And so one thing that never made sense to me from an industrialized standpoint is, okay, you've got your low rectification column still. There's nothing wrong with it. But then if you're gonna focus so much on that barrel giving you all of those unique flavors in that spectrum, right? Why use different grains? So if you're going to go into a pot still, let's approach this the same way that the old school Indiana pre-prohibition Black Forest of Indiana distillers approached it, which is that you're trying to come at this from a manner where you're taking all those positive aspects of the grain, as it were, ripe in the field. Just like with grapes, it has terroir, it has flavor, it has character, it has a place where it's from that's representative. Let's try to capture that, and let's do a blend and a balance. So 50% raw material fermentation and distillation, and then 50% maturation, so that even if down the road we come out with a 12-year-old wheated bourbon, I still want you to taste those positive aspects of that wheat. I still want that grain to be there, and I want you to go, yeah, that's distinctly wheat.
Yeah. And that's the great part about being able to taste a lot of different, I'll just say whiskeys, is just to get these different profiles and then to learn a little bit more about how it's all done and why it is that we're tasting, what it is we're tasting. It just gives you that much more appreciation for, what is actually in that bottle. Because for you just kind of giving the layman's terms of what it is you do, that in itself is a lot. That's more than any of us have any idea what in the world you're even talking about. But but we understand, because it translates into the whiskey. So when I'm sitting here and I'm just sipping on some of the Lee Sinclair, and I'm trying to listen to you and think about it, and you get you get that kind of like that oatiness, that grain, the creaminess of it all, and as you kind of sip on it, you start to think and appreciate, like, wow, there's a lot that really goes into this. This isn't just, 3 or 4 little grains and, you put it in a mash tun or whatever it may be. But, I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of the people who are listening tonight are really going to appreciate. And that's why I wanted to also do this, was because I think, in fairness to you guys, more people need to know what goes into some of these brands outside of Kentucky and MGP.
I agree.
And truly understand, like, when you get this, you're not trying to make this taste like Kentucky bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
You want this to taste like what it is you're imagining and putting out into this bottle for it to be different.
I agree. And there's an old Rush song that's like that. So it's a show, don't tell, you know, that's a good one for us. But, and I think that's part of the issue with craft right now.
Yeah.
Craft is finally getting some respect, but the negative aspect of craft we brought on ourselves to some degree or another, because a lot of craft distillers got in, they had no experience whatsoever, never distilled anything in their life. They put it out there, they asked for a premium, people bought it, they taste it, and they thought, that's terrible. Well, those guys are either now out of business, or they've been in business long enough that they figured out what they're doing, or they got smart and they hired a home distiller or otherwise trained distiller to come in and do what they're doing. And, you know, I think that there was a little stigma on craft there, and that's starting to finally go away, and for good reason, because craft distillers have figured out what they're doing. And the worst thing that any distiller, it doesn't matter if they're craft or one of the big boys, in my opinion, the worst thing that could possibly ever happen in this industry, the worst thing that anybody in this industry can ever say is, I can't tell you because it's a trade secret. You're never going to replicate anything that any of us do, even if I give you the exact recipe, the exact mash bill. You don't have the same equipment, etc. You know, people talk about that for years. But we're very open about everything that we do. And, you know, for example, with that Lee Sinclair, you know, all of our fermentations, we have 1,200 gallon fermenters, stainless steel closed top. We don't do any sour mashing. We've done it for one product, but it's another story for another time. We don't sweet mash though either. So we drop pH with either citric acid or malolactic bacteria. So what we do is we have a 600 gallon corn cooker. We split our mash into two sections. So day one, first 600 gallons, we're using yeast that we propagate ourselves, a house yeast as we call it, that has a very specific character to it. A lot of times it can come off as like a little eucalyptus, maybe a little horehound candy. You get a lot of that sort of thing in there. And then day two, we kill that yeast off with another yeast, one of 3 different brandy varieties. But we're huge, or I'm huge in particular on like the mouthfeel of whiskeys. Whiskey can be delicious. If it doesn't have a mouthfeel, it is pointless. And so like with that Sinclair, you get that creamy mouthfeel you're talking about. That is 100% from the oats. Those oats add so many long chain fatty acids. But you're gonna find that Maddie Gladden has got an amazing mouthfeel too, but it's from an entirely different source. That's what I was just gonna say. I mean, the two in terms of the mouthfeel is like, I mean, honestly, it's almost identical. Thick, rich, creamy. You know, so both of them, as different as they are, they both have a very similar mouthfeel. Yeah, the Maddie is all about manipulation of the vapor path in the pot still, like we were talking about. So we don't run any reflux on either of those stills. But what I do is the still that we distill all the bourbons on is named well, see, that's where the barrel tasting gets in the way there. So is named Inanna. So she is a 4-plate hybrid. We don't run the plates, but what I do is, so on Sinclair, for example, I will actually run that still up, and then it goes over. I've got a copper gin basket. I'll drop the vapor down into that gin basket. It's full of copper too. Okay. So then it's getting a little natural reflux coming up and then back over. On the Maddie, on the other hand, straight off the still, hot and fast. And then that mouthfeel that you're getting, we cut just a tiny little bit into the last fraction of alcohol off the pot still, the tails, just a little further than what you'd expect to go. But what that does is it gives you some of that oiliness. And that oiliness is perfect because it reacts with your saliva. Even after you drink that Maddie, you sit there for a minute, that flavor just comes right back on the palate and just clings.
It's so oily. I mean, when you move this thing in the glass, it's honestly probably one of the more oily bourbons I think I've seen. I mean, it's really, I mean, everywhere you look, I mean, it's just, it runs slow. It coats the whole entire glass. I mean, it's like an oil slick on your glass. And we all know, I mean, that helps to translate over to the palate and flavors and not all that stuff being stripped out. So, you know, kudos to you guys for not like just dicking around and just stripping it all just to get more stuff into.
Hell no.
And I know, I mean, I know you would have nothing to do with with
No.
all of that. But
you couldn't even pay me enough money in this world to go and again, not knocking anybody, but to go and watch a computer screen and run a low rec column still and make those kinds of products. They're just, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
See, Matt there's got a great question that I wanted to get to, because I always forget to mention this, because I always say number 2 char on stuff. And then I never explain it unless we're on a tour and there's extended time. So the reason for that is people have this idea of char being flavor. The char in a barrel is not the flavor from the barrel. The flavor comes from that toast layer. That char, that traditional 3-4 char, is there in those barrels to help filter that product, because if you're running on a low rec column still, you can't make a tight heads cut because your alcohol is all coming off in one go, right? So you can vaporize some of that by running your condenser a little hot, but you need that char level as a filtration device to pull out any of that stuff that you don't want over time. So for us with pot stills and being able to make a very tight cut, and the same would be true of like a true coffee column, you could do this. We don't need that real heavy char. We need a number 2 char because we don't need a whole lot of filtration, and we want that toast layer underneath, that medium plus toast and medium plus toast on the heads. That's where that sweetness is at. That's where those unique flavors are at. We also get more lignin, and lignin gives it breaks down more easily with more water. It also gives like toasted coconut, toasted hazelnut, those sorts of things that fit our profile very well.
Yeah. I mean, that Sinclair, I mean, the nose on it, I mean, it's fruity and creamy and all. I mean, it's a really nice nose. So I guess speaking of that in terms of like transition, let's talk a little bit about some of the whiskeys. Then we'll touch on the apple brandy as well. But so let's talk a little bit. I guess I went with the wheater first, just to not influence the rye part of it, just because it's a little softer and sweeter. But yeah, look, what's kind of behind Lee Sinclair, the name, and you know the whiskey in that bottle.
Yeah, so Spirits of French Lick is not just about the whiskey or the product in the bottle. It's also about the spirits of the local place. So, you know, there's a lot of marketing stories out there, and we're another one of those companies that put a dead guy on a bottle. Okay, we're guilty of that. I'll give you that much. But the thing about it is, Southern Indiana has this deep, rich history that nobody knows about, and there are these characters that I don't feel like got their due. And so Sinclair was one of those characters. Sinclair was, in his time, he was a huge banker, for one thing. He's also a descendant of the Sinclairs of Scotland, the clan Sinclairs. So Sinclair was originally from Greene County, Indiana. He was the son of a textile mill owner. He moved to Washington County, Indiana, which is where I live at, with his first wife, lived here, built a huge textile mill in Southern Indiana, in Washington County, Salem in particular. And in the late 1800s, he built quite a fortune for himself. And West Baden and French Lick, which are these two little sister towns, right? I mean, you can't say it's a road that separates them. They're right next to each other. A county over in Orange County, which is where we're at. And the groundwater in the valley part of that area, not the hill water, but the groundwater in the valley, is very mineral rich. So for years, people have been going there as basically a resort to this little hotel called the Mile Lick Hotel and Resort. And so Sinclair bought that because it was right along the railroad tracks. He could drive in, or ride in every day. It was a good business for him. Went along with this banking, New Albany and Salem State Banks. He was president and partial owner of, and it burned down. And the only thing that kept Sinclair in the business, because he thought, well, that's a loss, I'm just going to get out of this, whatever. His daughter, he loved her so much, and she was so into this hotel resort idea that she talked him into building a new one. So he built in West Baden, across the street from where our distillery is located, what at the time was considered the world's first fireproof hotel. It was a resort and spa. It had the world's largest freestanding dome for nearly 70 years at the time. He was told that it couldn't be built, and he just kept going from engineer to engineer to engineer until he found one 20-something-year-old guy that was like, I can make that happen. And they did it. And so I thought that Sinclair in particular, we're on Sinclair Street, right? Sinclair would have known good whiskey. There's no way he didn't, and he was alive in the time that there's certainly no doubt in my mind that he knew some of the Kentucky distillers. He certainly knew a lot of the Indiana distillers. And so, we want to pay tribute to him, because I'm a historian at heart, right? I can write 15 pages on these guys, 20 pages, whatever. Nobody cares. Yeah, three people are going to read that. But if I take Sinclair's story and a compelling image of some sort and put it on that label, suddenly it's like necromancy. You brought this person back to life. Nobody in, Mississippi knew who Lee Sinclair was until they saw that bottle. And maybe you get interested enough when you're looking at that bottle and you're drinking it, you like the whiskey, you connect with that character to some extent. So
well, and to that point, that's not a BS story. That's not a made up legend. Yep. I mean, that's all factual. So, I know you've written some incredible articles. I've read some of those things, and it's, you can tell, like, in addition to the passion for whiskey, you got a passion for history and all of that too. So, I mean, that's they kind of correlate a little bit, whiskey goes back so long that you kind of tie a lot of these different things together. So it's really, really fun. So, so I guess let's talk about the actual whiskey in the bottle. So what is it with the Lee Sinclair that you decided to do a 4 grain?
So again, that was for me, that was always going to be the first one out the gate. So, because that was the first mash bill that I came up with, officially. So, when I was 15 and I was, they told me, they wouldn't tell me how to do anything, right? Just make something that's good, bring it to us. So that was the first one that worked. And I literally threw oats in there because I'd never seen them use oats before. And I thought, well, oats are a grain. Let's throw it in there and see what happens. And it worked. Later on, I found out that oats were actually the number 2 crop in Kentucky and Indiana both. And bourbon in the 1850s, it's very common to use oats or oat malt in a lot of those bourbons. So it's not even a new thing. And I've often said nothing we do is new. If I went back to the 1850s, 1840s, I'd find farm distillers doing things very similar to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange mash bill. It's basically a wheated bourbon is what it is. So 60 corn, 17 wheat, 13 oats, and 10. We throw in caramel malt, which is a brewer's malt. The single least sexy thing in a distillery, in a bourbon distillery, is distiller's malt, because it doesn't have any real flavor to it. It has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is convert starch into sugar for the yeast to eat. Brewer's malts, on the other hand, there's such a world of flavor there with different roasting techniques and those sorts of things, and there's no reason not to use them. They bring such a different dimension. I mean, even in a traditional mash bill, we do a true wheated. We'll have a bottled and bond out of that here shortly in the spring, or this coming later this spring. It's basically the old APH Stitzel mash bill, same wheated bourbon mash bill that everybody uses, but we switch out for caramel malt, and it's night and day. It's night and day.
Yeah, you can see. I mean, it's a great profile, and here's one of the things I wanted to kind of highlight right here was this has always been, from the beginning to now, part of the reason why I love getting behind some of the, I don't even want to say smaller brands, but it's not Jim Beam, it's not Wild Turkey. Right. And like Matt says, I'm so intrigued, need to find some of the French lick now. Thanks for the exposure. And that's really always been one of the things that's been important, is there's so many good, I'll say now, even more than it was just even a couple of years ago. But for a lot of these smaller distilleries, including you guys, the things that are happening now and the people that are behind these whiskeys, there's so many good things happening that for people to venture outside of, MGP and Kentucky and all of that, there's some fantastic whiskeys and spirits out there that a lot of people are truly missing out on. And this was why I'm happy as hell to be doing this, with you guys, and just to bring a little bit of exposure. Hell, at the end of this thing, if there's a handful of people that didn't know about it and they're going to go try it, then I did what I was hoping to do, get people exposed to something different.
And thank God for folks like you, because legitimately we would not be where we are right now if it were not for people like you giving us a chance, and you guys pushing the envelope too, right? So you're not tasting the normal stuff, right? And thank God that profile. And again, I love that spectrum of Kentucky bourbon, but thank God people are drinking outside of that now, because there is so much cool shit out there.
Yep.
That the world for a long time was not prepared for, but they will be. There are entire categories of spirits that are, we'll call them whiskey adjacent.
Yeah.
that most people have never even heard of, never even dreamed of, that can be brought back. And we're getting there. Yeah. We're getting there.
Yeah. And I get it a lot of times where, if I reviewed something like this, even back in the day, a lot of people would comment, never heard of it, I don't know where to get it. thanks for doing the review. Now I can look for it, whatever it may be. So, that's always the nice part is that, people, there's, some people are always saying, oh, you kind of review some like weird stuff and all that. And, it was never about like weird or different. It was just trying different things. It was getting those different profiles, and I would say with the difference from what you guys do, I would say versus like maybe another smaller craft distillery is, you've seemed to figure it out with the fact that, hey, we are different, but I'm still going to give you one goddamn solid whiskey, and that's, and I know listening to you and all those other things, the passion that you have, behind that is what draws me into a lot of these things, and it's translated into your whiskey. So, great job on that.
I appreciate it, man. That's always kind of been my attitude is I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to do it as well as I possibly can. And you either like it, you love it, you hate it. And then if you hate it, you can fuck off. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, if you want to buy it and try it and it's not for you, so be it. But for other people, like I've said to them through reviews and all of that, whether you like it or not, I really don't give a shit. I'm just doing a review of it. If you like that, great. Yep. But there's a lot of people where you get some nice positive feedback. All of us, who have whiskey channels, that, hey, thanks for the exposure to that. I would have never have tried it had you not done a review of it. And that is what honestly makes me feel good. I could give two shits about all the haters and people send you nasty stuff and all that. But it's when those people like Matt had a comment before about just the exposure, like, hey, I'm going to give this a try now. So that's awesome.
I've always been that like glass half empty guy. And I think that's helped me out like substantially, because I've always told people like, well, shit, when something goes right, like you're surprised by it. You know what I mean? Like that actually worked out. So I think that's that's played out in my favor over the years. Maybe not early on, because I tend to be a little mouthy from time to time, not intentionally. But I also think that it's kept me from thinking that like that I should just expect that people will know what it is, how it tastes, or that people won't. I don't know. I think it's almost like for me, a lot of times the chase is more fun than the catch. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. So yeah, it's like that line from the Dark Knight that the Joker says, I'm like a dog chasing a car. I wouldn't know what to do with it if I caught it. So
you got it. And that's the cool part. Cause I mean, I think that's honestly part of what keeps you doing what you're doing, always pushing the envelope and doing different things. It's probably the chase more than it is the catch. You're always searching and chasing for that next thing. What can I do next that's going to be different that people will enjoy? So, but Jason said, Jason, obviously you were on his channel a few weeks back, and he's saying hi. So yeah, I know he and I were talking about some things, and one of the other guys left a comment here. Where was that? Right here. We are 100% working on this right here, the old mashing journey. So I think we know a guy and a girl, so we might be able to get some of this stuff worked out. And I'll tell you what, if you guys, if we have the opportunity to do a barrel pick, we are going to pick. I'll tell you what, we're going to pick one hell of a barrel. We don't know which one it's going to be or what it's going to be yet, but we will 100% bring you some good shit. I can tell you that. So we'll
get up in the warehouse and we'll get into 23 or 24 of them.
I don't know about that. So we'll have to start early and like make sure there's lunch planned and all of that. But yeah. So all right, I want to eventually get to the brandy too, because this is something that in my state of Wisconsin we drink a shit ton of brandy as well. So, but before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the Maddie Gladden. What's kind of behind Maddie Gladden and what's in this bottle right here?
Yeah, so I'll give you the short version of the greatest female hero story ever told. So Maddie was from Salem. She was a housekeeper for Sinclair when she was a teenager. So there is a connection between those two. They're actually buried in the same cemetery, not maybe 300 feet apart. She fell in love with one of Sinclair's business associates, and he obviously did not smile upon that given her age. And so they took off to Tennessee. Shortly thereafter, that husband and her I think, well, they got married, then they got divorced, or he died. We can't prove one way or the other. She was married again. She's working at a brothel in Chattanooga and one in Nashville. All these rumors about her working at a brothel end up back in Salem, Indiana, which at the time is a very conservative railroad town. Still is this day, not a railroad town anymore, but very conservative, with a stopover basically for Chicago businessmen on their way down to Nashville to do business. So she does that for a few years. She decides that she's going to retire from the whoring business, as it were, and move back to Salem. And she comes into Salem with a bunch of money. And she could have very easily earned this money herself, considering the rates that she charged for what she did later on. But there's a long-standing story that she was kind of P.T. Barnum's favorite mistress. And so P.T. Barnum basically had paid her off to get out of the business and kind of get out of his business as well, I think. So she moves back to Salem. She starts building this beautiful Queen Anne house right on Main Street, and all those rumors about her and what she does going around town. And, you know, the women are saying, oh, she's going to move. She's going to, you know, bring in a house of vice, you know, and the whole thing. And so she moves in, and that's exactly what she does. She's married to a guy named Percy Gladden at the time, who was from New York, but on their wedding certificate called himself a cowboy. I don't know how you're from New York and a cowboy, but whatever.
Yeah.
Who owned several motion picture houses and several bars there in Salem. She's married to him for about a year. They get divorced. It's a very tumultuous relationship. And he comes back into town about a year later, drunk off the railroad, and tries to break into the house. She shoots him in the face with a 38 caliber pistol underneath the left eye. He lives through it. They're married again a year later. But Maddie basically opened what was called the Gladden House, which was a house of entertainment, as they called it in those days. It was catered to those businessmen and high dollar clients. She had about 4 girls that worked for her. They were all well educated, well read. They had to know how to play the harpsichord. This was a true house of entertainment, even if things did end up in, you know, sex at the end of the night.
Yeah,
there was more going on. She got away with it for so long, legitimately, because there were no laws saying you couldn't do that in Salem. And eventually, you know, the more prudish people pushed for those laws, and they put her out of business after 6 or 7 years. I suspect that she was catering to some of the town men as well, because there is a back stair passageway that's kind of, it's not hidden, but if you didn't know to look for it,
yeah,
it will take you out of the back of the house. So I suspect that some of the local townsmen were, you know, in there as well. She was married one last time to a local farmer, and must have been true love that time, because they both had prenups. When she died, Percy bought most of her stuff. And the irony of it is we always try to make sure we take the first few bottles of everything that we name after somebody, either go to the grave as a tribute, go to the local museum, or to a descendant, or worst case scenario, if there's nowhere else for it to go, if I have somebody that's ever played that character for me during historic reenactments or whatever, we'll give it to that person. Oh, but cool. For a long time, I knew what cemetery she was in, but I didn't know where their grave was, because her name is on the backside of the grave. And no relationship here to the Kennedy family that I know of. But it is ironic, given her profession, that she is buried in a Kennedy family plot. So, you know, everything in life comes around.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not saying, but you're saying.
Right. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Well, I gotta say thanks to Troy. So in addition to these samples tonight, Troy's going to also give away. So he's got the Lee Sinclair. So he's got the a couple of picks, the seal box pick, and then a rye pick that we're doing. So you get some good things. So not only are you getting this stuff with any super chat, you're going to get what Troy's got, what he's got shaken. So thanks, Troy. I appreciate that very, very much. And you got one. So Troy from Popham, he's got a whiskey channel too, and he does a great job with those things too. And he's another one that's, you know, passionate about what he does and flavor profiles and all that. So thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. So
yeah, that's awesome. Those are good picks too. Every one of those is a fantastic pick.
You probably in a little bit of a way probably remember just about every single one that comes through a little bit. I bet.
I do. Because I'm real particular, and I think Laurelyn Doty can verify this. I'm real particular about what gets picked and what goes out. I don't, you know, I'm not going to let you come in and pick a barrel that I think is trash and take it, because there's people that'll do that in a heartbeat. And I hate that. That doesn't mean that anything that somebody picks is going to be my flavor. Right. Yeah. But it's going to be up to my standards, or it's not going. That's just the way it is.
It's kind of nice that you still kind of put your little bit of a fingerprint on it, where like, well, maybe that's good, but maybe I've got something a little bit better for you. Let's kind of keep pushing the envelope here and see if there's something that might kind of sway them. So
yeah, and so sometimes it's weird for me too, because I'll give you a good example. This isn't out as a mainstream product yet, but we have sent out a couple single barrels. It's not my thing at all. I think it's interesting, and it's kind of 50-50 with like bourbon drinkers. You put this in front of a hardcore bourbon drinker, they either love it or they hate it. There's no in between. Nobody's ever been like, yeah. So buckwheat bourbon, we've done a couple picks of buckwheat bourbon, and those are hard for me, because it's not. I have to do that thing where I'm like, you didn't make this for you. You made this for other people. So as long as qualitatively it's where it needs to be,
yeah,
it's okay. So
is the buckwheat bourbon that you do through that like distillation, is it even more grain heavy?
Yeah, because it's got so it's got toasted buckwheat in it, kasha, and that toast note comes through big time.
Okay.
And then buckwheat, it also has like almost like a think of like a roasted almond flavor.
Yeah.
But it can have a little of this grassy characteristic to it too with the untoasted buckwheat. So it's an interesting drink, and there are people who are fanatic about it, which I'm like, okay, well, good. I'm glad that that's your thing. So yeah, happy to oblige you.
Well, and it's something different. I mean, there's another thing. I mean, this is just, what you're wanting to do, and always try something different. And, I mean, that's good. I mean, to give people options of a lot of high quality stuff, even better. So, all right. So here you go. There's Adam. So says, love Spirits of French Lick, and Alan Bishop. Apparently he loves you too. Great show. Thanks. Need a Spirits of French Lick pick for the Mash and Journey. We're working on that, Troy. We're working on that, Adam.
Hell yeah.
So that'll be a good one. I mean, just tasting your standard offerings and outside of the single barrel stuff. I mean, I can only imagine. I've never had one, but I can only imagine what they're like, and I look forward to kind of getting into one of those. So
the beauty of it too is that it's all pot still, right? So you don't get consistency from pot still distillation. You manage it over time by doing your blends. So you come in and you're getting. My dog just came in and sneezed. I apologize.
It's okay.
You're gonna get. And if you're in the Lee Sinclair aisle, you're going to get 4 or 5 very unique profiles out of there. And that's just the whiskey itself, not counting barrel influence, that whole thing.
Yeah. So. Well, and that's always the fun part about doing these barrel picks, is that, one barrel right next to the other one could completely different profile. And it's like, it's just the fun. It's the fun part about choosing, a barrel of your own as to the different profiles and ultimately what it is you settle on and why. And unfortunately, Jason and I have very similar palates. So there's not a lot of, when we know, it's not like there's a big debate on, like there could be some subtleties, but I can guarantee you guys, between me and Jason and Alan being there, we'll get you something good. So, yeah. Where did I have before? I had Adriana sent me a thing. I think she wanted to ask you a question. Let me go back here.
Okay.
Where is that?
And I should also add that Maddie is a high rye bourbon. So it's 55 corn, 35 rye, 10 malt. So there's a lot of debate about what a high rye is. In my opinion, if you're going to do high rye, 30 or higher is really high rye in my opinion. Yeah.
So. Well, and people go crazy over these high rye bourbons, and I mean, they offer such a great amount of flavor. So, all right, what did it say? Best time I hand on the samples, no licks in Utah. Maddie Gladden sounded amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, Adriana, it really, really is it's interesting because it's different. That's the best part about these. I mean, there aren't these other things that necessarily taste like this, and that's a great thing. I think it's always a good thing when there's a lot of, different stuff. So, what do we got from Wags here? Need to get some of that juice. Can't find it here in California. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about distribution. Where are you guys currently at right now, roughly?
So it's kind of constantly evolving. I know that we've talked to California. I would have to check with Laura Lynn, our director of operations, to see where we're at with California. But we are Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, Mississippi, Louisiana, I know Texas. Texas is a big state for us. I love Texas. Yeah, they've paid a couple of paychecks for me. I'm positive of that.
Good.
And then Sillbox.com currently, you can, you have to check their list and see what all states they're shipping to currently, but usually 30 plus states. So it's out there, and there's more coming all the time. We also sent some to we did some single barrels with Whiskey Witch Nation out in North Carolina. So it's getting there. It's slow, and the distribution system is the biggest hurdle in the world as far as any moderately sized craft distiller has to deal with. It's every state's different. Every state's a nightmare. There's we love Ohio. I'd love to be in Ohio, and we're right next to them. But there's a rationale for why we're not in Ohio with distribution. So
yeah. All right, before we get too far into this thing, I have got to bust open the brandy and have a little bit of this. I mean, it's when I've had some of it. This is actually, I had another bottle of this one, but when you had sent this one a while back, you signed the side of it. So I actually just opened this one not long ago, but had another one that myself and my dad, he was a big brandy guy, but when he tried this, he was like, holy shit. He's like, that's what brandy is supposed to really taste like. And obviously apple brandy, but something a little bit different. And he liked the fact that it was a little bit different. So
this kind of a fun thing I think you'll like about that brandy too. And I'll include the other two bottles there in this as well. So I mentioned the cemetery thing earlier and all that stuff. So the first bottle of Sinclair, both the 2-year and the 4-year, both in Sinclair's mausoleum with him, which is a whole nother story. The Maddie Gladden bottle number 1 is actually in the safe that Maddie kept her money in the Gladden House. And the Hoosier Apple Brandy bottle number 1, we took down to the Old Clifty Distillery, because that's the name of the brandy, is Old Clifty. And there's no distillery building there now. There's nothing. It's a nature preserve. But we poured that one out for the ghosts of Old Clifty. And we left I left the bottle there, the empty bottle there, as kind of a scavenger hunt to see if anybody would pick it up. And we did have a woman pick that up, and we gave her a free tour and tasting and all that stuff a couple of years ago. So that was fun. But to your point about the brandy and that being, that surprise, wow, that's what apple brandy tastes like.
Yeah.
There's a story about the Wolf family. The Wolves were distillers here in southern Indiana, apple brandy distillers from about 1818 until Prohibition, basically. And the last one that was active in the distillery, his name was Arlen Wolf, and he died in late 40s, early 50s. I can't remember. But when he was on his deathbed, he asked his nephew, he said, I want a good drink of apple brandy. Well, there was no apple brandy left at that time, so they went and got whatever they thought was apple brandy. It was flavored, cheap apple brandy. And they said that they gave it to him, and he took a drink of it and he spit it out and said, I don't know what this shit is, but this ain't apple brandy and it ain't nothing like what we made. So I take my apple brandy very seriously, because that's the legacy of southern Indiana, Hoosier occupied northern Kentucky. There was a 6-county region, Washington, Orange, Lawrence, Crawford, Harrison, and Perry County, that they called the Black Forest of southern Indiana. 150 plus apple brandy distilleries between 1855 and 1914, the capital of apple brandy production for the entire world at that point, and considered of a higher quality. We are the only operating commercial distillery in that 6-county region to this day, and the first to make a true Hoosier style apple brandy on the legal side since probably 1914, 1915, because most of them closed prior to Prohibition. So what you're getting with that apple brandy is a true Hoosier style apple brandy. It's not like Calvados. It's not just that, that apple note up front. It's really bourbon's sexier older sister. It's a very easy transition for a bourbon drinker. Yeah. So it's bigger, more robust, more round, more heavy, more, overripe red apple, more apple crisp, more of those sort of characteristics.
You just nailed it. I was going to say, like, this is like an apple crisp with that like nice vanilla, ice cream on the side. I mean, it's all of like a nice vanilla crisp. And I bet like on a, I already know, on a cold evening, that really tastes mighty fine. I'll tell you that. So
I'll tell you what, you take it and put it in some hot apple cider, just warm it up a little bit, and throw just, and it sounds weird, but it's an old school thing. Throw just a little butter on there and a little cinnamon. Oh man. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
All right. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like fat washing basically. So
yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's let me ask you about this. So I had this one. Now this is going back a little ways. The weeder. Are you still doing this?
That's the collector's item right there. That's actually going on the tertiary market for like, I don't know, like 5 Dogecoins or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So
it sounds like a lot. It sounds like it could be expensive, but
right. I don't know if that's true or not, but
yeah.
Hopefully.
Well,
No,
it's already open, so it's only worth what I'm willing to drink or share it with people. So
that was the open price.
Oh, geez. Well,
right.
Well, there you go. Look at you guys. You guys could get in on something that's going for whatever the hell it was that Alan said before, whatever that monetary value is. That's what you guys got. But
listen, you know how to play stock market, don't you? What you say is that no, we don't have any more of that because Elon Musk bought all of it.
Yeah, yeah. That's all you gotta do is just build the hype, and then all of a sudden, all the whiskey taters just come out of everywhere and are willing to spend just about anything. So,
oh yeah,
I remember you did that with one of your releases not long ago. I knew you were you were kind of screwing around with all of that. I'm like, here he goes again. So
we do it all the time with the one-off labels, just because they're meant to be cheeky and fun. But yeah. The weeder, we still do have some of it available, not a lot. Whatever's there is what's there. So that's a blend of our 2-year weeded, 70% corn, 20 wheat, 10% caramel malt, and then some 7-year-old merchant bourbon. I can't tell you the distillery, but I can tell you what state it's in, which should cue you because there's like 2 there. So it was from Wyoming. That was done to kind of get our name out there, get our foot in the door. That will go away. That will be replaced by what we're going to release here very shortly.
Okay.
The William Dalton, which is our bottled and bond 100% ours weeded bourbon, same mash bill, but 4 years old and named after Indiana's longest continuous distiller, Mr. William Dalton, who worked at the Daisy Spring Mill Distillery for 55 years, running pot stills, wood-fired pot stills, hand stirring mash, 55 years. So,
boy, incredible. Yeah, I mean, hey, I mean, people appreciate. I mean, people, even people who don't know what it is you're necessarily even referring to half the time, it's amazing because I think it just makes people think a little bit more about the brand and the passion, because you could come on here and say, oh, this is, 75% corn, 20% rye, and just leave it at the real simple stuff that people understand. But when the passion kicks in, there's no stopping that. So
no. Well, and the other word, the synonym for master distiller, you know what that is, don't you? It's master bullshitter. Master bullshitter. That's the whole thing.
That's okay. I mean, people appreciate hearing stories and the passion behind brands and all of that. So, well, like here, Todd says, Battle of the Big Ten, Badgers and Hoosiers tonight. So, all right, John T. What do you got, John? Great content. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Need to try some French lick. Well, you're in it to win it, so to speak. So thanks for that. So, all right, before you go, hopefully somebody in here has been keeping track of the super chats and they can give me a number of entries. And then I don't know if somebody wants to run a randomizer or give me the amount of entries into tonight's giveaway. And I'll do I'll ask our friend Google what the number is. So while we're doing that, so what do you have kind of coming down the pipeline? What's anything you can share that's coming out?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff lined up between mainstream releases and kind of one-offs. So we just came out with several one-offs. The Unpretentious, which is gone, and it's been gone, never come back. We've got the Right Way, which is a rye whiskey finished in absinthe barrel. We've got Fascination Street, which is a New American Oak finished absinthe, so a little hybrid between bourbon and absinthe. We're getting ready to roll out with that William Dalton I just mentioned, but also the Morning Glory, which is the Kasha bourbon. That'll be out this spring. This fall will release a bottled and bond 5-year-old rye whiskey that's based on the old George Washington rye mash bill. So it's 65 rye, 30 corn, and 5 malt. So that's exciting. I'm excited to get that out there.
That sounds delicious.
Mm-hmm. This coming fall too, we're going to put out bottled and bond apple brandy. That's coming. That's always been a goal of mine. Everything that we do that's going to be mainline is going to be bottled and bond, unless it's a single barrel or something odd like the Iconoclast series. I just pulled a very special, to me, very special single barrel that we had. I think it was the last barrel of 2016 wheated bourbon that we had on hand. That I had gotten some French mocha staves from Steve Beam, of all people. He brought them up to me and dropped them off. And I put a couple staves in there, and man, that stuff is delicious. This summer, there's going to be a very limited release, 2-barrel dump of this very special apple brandy that we basically made an apple brandy like you would a white apple brandy. So very clean heads cut, very clean hearts cut, tails cut, etc. And then we took that and put it into once used French red wine barrels that were then used for organic agave tequila. And it's actually matured for 3+ years in these tequila barrels. And it's going to be 113.3 proof is where I put it at. So it's got some heft to it for sure. But that tequila tonality is there, that apple tonality is there. Yeah. There's always something. There's so much more back there in that warehouse. You know, when we started, it was literally like Tuesday, don't have anything going on. I'm going to find something to distill. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, all those things. And are you just, this is selfishly me speaking now, as far as barrel picks, are you just doing standard stuff? Or are you doing any of the kind of funky kinds of things you've got going on at all?
So we have done some of the funky things before, and we can do them. The biggest problem is that it adds a little more time to the order, because sometimes we have to develop a label or whatever. But there's certainly some of that funky stuff back there that should and needs to go out as single barrels for, you know, specific accounts where it makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, we've definitely done that before. And actually, I guess I kind of get myself in trouble or get the company in trouble sometimes with that, because I made the mistake recently of sending out something that I knew better, 2 things that I knew better that didn't have a label developed, and I didn't think about it because they asked for something odd. Yeah. And so now it's like, oh shit, you got any ideas on that label?
Yeah. Well, so. we won't hold you to anything. I was just curious because I know when Jason and I are doing some of these things, we're always trying to find, not something super crazy, but if there's something that we know is really, really good and it's different, like those are the things we want to bring to the people that are part of our whiskey club. And it's fun to share that kind of stuff with people because, for you guys, it's definitely something different. You're not going to go anywhere else and get it. So it's very singular and kind of special. So, okay.
We played that game. I'll tell you this real quick. I apologize, but this is fun. So we played that game with our new Canadian distributors, if this works out. And I have something that I want to send to Canada that's very unique. That's a 100% rye whiskey that we won't do anywhere else. And my joke to them was, I just want to see if there are people who will actually drive to Canada to get this, So it's a very selfish thing on my behalf. It's also a little bit of a love letter to Canada, given the rye whiskey thing. I just want to see what the reaction is. And, it's a little bit of a prankster thing in me, I guess. So.
That's okay. I don't blame you. You send your 100% rye up to Canada and see how that goes. You know there's some crazy bastard who will do it. If you put someone to a challenge, someone will do it. That's for sure.
I can think of 4 or 5 guys off the top of my head that will be muling it back to the States.
Well, I could do it. Now my wife's Canadian, so I've got in-laws that are there. So I could just have them. Well, they'd have to ship it now for me to get it about this time next year because of how slow USPS is. I could get another second release here from the distillery probably quicker than I can get the one that's coming from Canada. So, all right, we've got 16 people who entered tonight. So let me ask Google here, and we'll see who the winner is. And Adriana, you can tell me who that will be. So, hey Google. Give me a random number between 1 and 16.
Here's a random number, 4.
Number 4, it came back as. So, Adriana, let me know who number 4 is, and that will be the person who gets some, I'm going to say some pretty special whiskeys. These are going to be things that, unless you probably seeked it out, you more than likely haven't tried. I'll say 2 of these. I'm guessing that a lot of people haven't had the Weeder. And a lot of people, I bet, haven't had the apple brandy. So you're going to be in for something special, and that will be. And is this something that only releases in fall?
So that's the plan with most of the apple brandy, short of that tequila. But yeah, it'll be, the goal is that every year, once that hits bottled and bond, there will be slight seasonal variations, A, because of apples, but B, because of the type of barrels. So the next dump is mostly hogshead barrels from Scotland. Then the one after that is mostly new American oak barrels. So yeah, it'll change over time.
Oh, so here's from a distiller to distiller. Iron Root, you were talking before. Robert Licorice, Alan's my hero. Great guy. You know,
love you, Robert.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
love what they're doing.
All right. Looks like our man Todd Ritter, who I'll probably see at the end of May. So I'll just bring you your stuff. I'll just bring all the bottles with me, and we can drink more than just a couple samples. So congrats on that. And to Alan, thank you so much. Before we leave, tell people where they can find you, what else you got going on, and I just want people to know more about your brand, you, and the ability to be able to go out and buy your stuff. So.
Yeah. So definitely check on distribution. If you're in a state where you don't have distribution at, annoy your local liquor store, your local distributor, whatever you got to do. We'll do the best we can to get there. For a small distillery, sometimes it's difficult, but we'll try our hardest for sure. Big thing is you can check us out at spiritsofFrenchlick.com, obviously, also stillbox.com. And then we do have distribution. I don't remember the states, Illinois, and there's a couple other there, through spirithub.com. As for myself, you can check out, if you're at all interested in distilling, you want to get geeky about it, you can check out my show with Christy Atkinson that we run every week, Distillers Talk. Just doing a simple search on any of your favorite podcast platforms should turn it up. And keep your eyes out as well for a new collective of folks out there, bloggers, podcast guys, YouTube guys, etc. There's something really cool coming up in the near future with just a lot of like-minded individuals who want to share more information about the spirits world in general with the rest of the world. So
yeah, well, the podcast that you do does a lot of that. You guys do a great job on your show. So all right, so apparently Todd's got a whole shitload of your stuff, so he's asked for me to pick another number. So somebody else is gonna get some spirits right now. So
that's awesome, right, Todd.
Give me another number. Hey Google, give me a random number between 1 and 16.
Going with 8.
Number 11.
Oh,
I don't know if it's showing up or not, but all right, Adriana, let me know who number 11 is, and that will be that'll be the new winner of the Spirits of French Lick. I mean, you guys, I know Adriana asked before, French Lick, where does the name kind of come from? Where's all that?
So this is a cool little history lesson for you. So French Lick actually predates a lot of things in the United States. So French Lick was originally a French fur settlement. So of course you had a lot of French fur trappers that ended up in the Ohio Valley illegally at the time. They set up a lot of outposts. They brought a lot of their culture with them here. You still occasionally, if you're in the right pockets of Southern Indiana, you will hear a little of kind of the French cultural background with like mythology and legends like the Loup Garou, things of that nature, but it's pretty rare. So French Lick and West Baden, having those sulfur springs, those mineral springs, they also had a lot of salt. So it was a good hunting ground. And so the French made sort of an outpost before you get to Vincennes in French Lick, and sort of hung out there, traded up and down all the rivers, fantastic fur trapping. French Lick itself is really, without the modern engineering that it has, is really swampland. So if you're on the take for, furs and things of that nature, I mean, beaver, mink, etc., that's the place you want to be at. Plus that salt lick would draw in all the animals. I mean, you can come into town nowadays, there's deer everywhere, and they're tame. They'll walk up to you because everybody feeds them,
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Well, so our new winner is Wade Ward. So Wade, congratulations. You can just send me an email at mybourbonjourney01@gmail.com. I'll probably leave it linked again in here too. If somebody wants to drop my email in there, that'd be great. And then Word, you can contact me that way. So, I gotta say thanks, man. I greatly appreciate your time. I wasn't planning on keeping you this long. I know you're a busy guy, and
you're all good, man.
I appreciate your time. So
I'm back in now. So
you're back in. Okay, you really get the fourth wind is kicked in for you now. Well, geez. I mean, if you've got a couple minutes, if you're on here, why don't we whatever you got, we'll share a little pour real quick. I mean, I got a drink with the man who distilled the stuff, for crying out loud. So I can't stop drinking the Lee Sinclair. I love the mouthfeel and the profile of it. It won't be quite 23 barrels, but I'm gonna do a little damage here on a Tuesday night. So, but
this
cheers,
is
I appreciate it.
Yeah, the Sinclair Iconoclast on this one is what this is. So cheers, sir. I appreciate it, man.
Cheers to you. What is that you're drinking, you said?
So this is what we call the Iconoclast. So it was a 3-barrel dump of these 3 barrels that were like way off profile from normal. And of their own accord, I would have never done anything with them. But in a blend, they're beautiful. And it's actually my favorite thing that we've ever put in the bottle. I mean, it's
really?
I couldn't design a better whiskey than this, and 100% it's just fate and accident. So
wow. Well, it's cool. It's cool how things like that happen at times, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's probably not a total fluke. I mean, you knew what you were doing probably when you were distilling it. Maybe you didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but you know, I mean, it couldn't have been shit products that turned out fantastic, you know. So you know,
but never gonna, like I said, real picky about what goes out. Never gonna, you know, we're setting on some barrels right now that could have went into the last dump, and I'm hard-headed enough and feel like I've hopefully earned enough respect at this point that I just told him, I said, there's 5 barrels that there's nothing wrong with them, but they need to set.
Yeah, well,
they just need their time.
You know, and that's another thing. I mean, to not get going, you know, too much, but you know, for a lot of whiskeys, you know, I mean, things do just need some time. You know, It's just not something you can always rush. I mean, and not that it has to be super old, but you know, these super really young things, you know, you can tell maybe some of the quality that's behind it and that it'll get better. But I mean, you know, when some people release these things, and this may be going back a little bit, but you get some of those older or newer distillers, and they would have to release it for financial reasons, and it wasn't ready. But it can be a brand killer. You know? It
can be. It's part of that set of mistakes we talked about earlier. And I'll tell anybody out there, here's the beauty of that thing though too, because age isn't always everything, obviously, as you guys know, and people are finding out. But you take somebody, I'm trying to think of somebody in particular. So Kelly down at Hartfield Distillery. She's making some fantastic stuff for very young stuff, but with these craft distillers that are making pot still stuff, ask them if you can taste their white dog, because if you've been to Barton or anywhere and you've tasted that white dog, man, you want to see somebody who knows how to distill taste that white dog right off the still and see if it's palatable, see if it's good stuff, and then you see just the difference in general between a pot and a column and a distiller who knows what they're doing versus one that doesn't. And you may not even know what any flaws are, but you can taste them. You're going to know them when you taste them. You may not know what they are, but you'll notice them. Yeah, you do. So, all right. On that note, thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate all of your time, and I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight and getting a little idea of, you know, the man behind, you know, Spirits of French Lick. I mean, I wanted to do this, and I've wanted to do this for a while, and I'm glad we were finally able to do this and just help shine a little bit. I know you've been on with some other people and some other podcasts and things, but it's well deserved. I mean, what you're doing is an incredible job, and it shows in your spirits. No, man. Thank you, brother. And I appreciate the fact that you actually had some nice, unique questions in there too. Cause I you know how it is. I don't like my own voice to start with. So I sound like a broken record if people ask the same questions over and over again, man. I appreciate it. So. Well, and I appreciate you. So, and everybody, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'll be back next Tuesday. I don't know with what yet. Next Tuesday may be a little bit more of just a kind of a recap of some things going on. Maybe I'll get a couple other guys on the channel, but we'll see. So again, Alan, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Everybody else in the chat, like I said, thank you so much. Great seeing everybody again. And like I say, it's about the journey, not the destination.
Cheers, everybody, and we'll see you next Tuesday.